All right, I call this meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization Administration and Finance Committee to order. I will read the notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. These are the meeting guidelines. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. You can mute and unmute yourselves at will. Please always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please use the raise hand function. You can find this by clicking on either the participants window at the bottom of your screen or the reactions button in the toolbar. I will then call upon participants as I see you. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Aaron McGuire via the chat at emaguire@ctps.org or by phone at 857-702-3681. And I will read the accessibility statement. This meeting is being recorded. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodation in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Aaron McGuire via the chat box, via email at emaguire@ctps.org, or by phone at 857-702-3681. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Kane. I'm with the MBTA Advisory Board, and I'm going to do a digital roll call of people. So I'm going to, when I say your name, can you say hello and identify yourself? Eric Barassa.
Hello, Eric Barassa with MAPC.
Leonard.
Leonard Diggins with the Advisory Council. I'm also going to try and log in by phone because I need to practice for next Wednesday. Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you twice, Len. Who else is on the committee? Brad, you on the committee? I don't know who's on the committee.
No, Brian, I'm not.
Well, you should be.
So other members, we have Metro West City of Framingham. I do not see a representative there. We have the City of Boston. I also don't see a representative. And then MassDOT.
Okay. Well,
Hi. Hi, everyone. This is Raisa Kwame, MassDOT OTP.
Hi, Raisa. Thanks for joining us. Sorry I didn't see you earlier. Great. So we have a quorum and everyone's introduced themselves. So we'll move on to public comment. If you are a member of the public who would like to make a comment on an item not on the agenda, please use the raise hand function and I will do my best to call upon you. We will also try to take comments. Wait, no, that's not this meeting. We would be delighted to hear your comments if you want to raise your hand. Brad, please go ahead.
Brian, I just didn't get a chance to thank you for the kind words, but I will note that it's important for Somerville to continue to be plugged in with the ANF committee because we serve as intercore sub-regional rep. And as you all know, we really take that responsibility seriously in terms of making sure that the 20 other members of the ICC are plugged in and that we're also continuing to build bridges between ICC and other sub-regions. So thanks for the ANF committee's continued work.
Thank you, Brad. You are a bridge builder, if nothing else. Literally and figuratively in your case. Okay, any other public comments? I will declare the public comment period closed and we'll move on to our first action item, which is item number 3, summary of the September 7th, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion to approve this so we can discuss it?
I'll make a motion to approve the summary of that meeting.
Thanks, Eric. Is there a second? Okay, I'll second it.
I was going to dig in second then, Brian. Sorry about that.
No worries. Leonard, you seconded it. Any discussion, questions, comments, edits? Seeing none, Aaron, can you call the roll, please?
Brian Kane.
Yes.
Dennis Giambetti joined us. So Dennis.
Hey.
Sorry, I'm late. Yes.
Thank you. Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassi, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
and Raisa Kwame.
Raisa Kwame, yes.
That carries.
Thank you very much, Dennis. You are never late. We are just early. Item 4, state fiscal year 2024 operating budget update Q2, Haral Gandhi.
Right. So, good afternoon, everyone. Silva and I will be presenting and discussing the SFY 2024 operating budget. And next slide, please. So before Silva goes into the details of the Q2 financials for SFY 24, I'd like to just provide a brief overview on where we are with the current fiscal year and then the expectations for the remainder of the fiscal year in the next 2 quarters. And then I'll also just touch on the development of the state fiscal year 2025 budget and a timeline and when to expect this for your review. So I would like to say that overall, I'm happy to report that we are in good standing through the first half of the fiscal year. We continue to see a balanced budget, which means our revenue and expenses are pretty close to each other. And even though they're trending lower than what the straight line projections are, we're able to manage our expenses relative to our revenue. And then one thing to note was at the last meeting, we reported an overhead rate that was a little bit higher than what it ended up being with some of the revisions that we needed to do for the first quarter financials. We ended up at a little bit lower overhead rate than what we had presented to you. So Silva will provide some details on that in a few moments. And then I wanted to just mention that even though our overhead rate is running a little lower than what we had projected, we do expect to ramp up our overhead expenses in the next couple of quarters. And that's typical. We usually see that in the third quarter that we have our performance evaluations, for example, so the entire agency is going to be charging more admin time. We also have our budget development, which we get input from the entire staff, and so they charge admin overhead for things like that. We also continue to have a high recruitment and interview committee time coming up. I think we have about 7 positions posted right now, so there's a lot of people on interview committees and a lot of time spent on recruitment efforts. So we do expect the overhead rate to be a little bit higher than in the third and fourth quarter of the current fiscal year. But we will continue to manage it and make sure that we're in a good financial standing at the end of the year. Next quarter, we will provide a projected year-end number for overhead, for all the revenue, expenses, and overhead. Typically around this time, we go and look at what our spending is to date and then see what we can allocate in the budget for the remaining 2 quarters, and then try to come up with a projected year-end number. And then just an update on the development of the state fiscal year 2025 budget. We have kicked off that process back in end of January, early February. All of our staff are gathering the needs for their groups, and we are coming up with assumptions for revenue and what grants we'll be receiving in SFY 2025. We have received preliminary numbers for the 3C funding for federal fiscal year 2025, which I think we're seeing less than a 1% increase in revenue on that side of the NPO budget. But we will be presenting all of this information. We're going to gather it, and we will be presenting this information probably in May to this committee, and then we can take it for approval in June to the NPO board. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Silva, who will provide more details on Q2, and then we can take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Haral. Next slide, please. Thank you. I will start by providing a summary of our revenue, expenses, and overhead rate through quarter two. As mentioned by Haral, we actually ended quarter one with an overhead rate of 116% rather than the previously presented overhead rate of 119%. In quarter two, we saw an increase in both our revenue and expenses when compared to quarter one. A few of the driving factors of this increase were quarter two being the start of our federal fiscal year, where our 2024 MPO contract was implemented. And we also saw an increase in our staff count. In quarter two only, we filled 5 full-time positions, varying from policy analysts to the manager of our MPO activities. In total, through quarter two, our total revenue was at 3.29 million and our expenses were at 3.24 million. Now, I want to briefly touch on the expenses row. As a reminder, we changed our accounting practice and have been spreading out our expenses that are more than $10,000 over the entire state fiscal year. And in recent quarters, where we see a surplus, we've been recognizing certain purchases entirely to ensure we are as close to our projected overhead rate of 120% for a more balanced budget. Overall, we finished the quarter with a total surplus of $54,000 and an overhead rate of 116.47%. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this next slide here shows a graph of our projected revenue in blue versus our actual revenue in orange through quarter two. Now, I want to remind you all that the blue bars are straight line projections. And as we know, although we hope to stay on track, our revenue does fluctuate throughout the year with varying project start and completion dates. As we see here, we have multiple categories for our revenue sources, which include MPO and MassDOT directed PL funds, MassDOT SPR funds, MassDOT Other, which includes our MassDOT On-Call contract, an MBTA category, and an Other category, which this year includes our most recently procured Vision Zero action plan funded by the Safe Streets for All grant. Looking at the numbers for each category, we see that our MPO and MassDOT directed PL category is our highest funding source overall. And with the straight line projection, it would indicate that we'd be at 2.9 million through quarter two, and our actual charges have been closer to 2.6 million. So we've charged about 90% of what was expected, which is great because it shows that we are on track. Another category I'd like to touch on is our MBTA category. In quarter two, we had about 11 active MBTA purchase orders, and our actual charges exceeded our projections. As we see on the graph, our actual was over the 329,000 projected, and we had a revenue of 362,000 in quarter two. You may notice that we underspent in the Other category. As previously mentioned, our Other category includes the Vision Zero action plan, and although work has commenced, it just hasn't been at the rate of a straight line projection, but we do expect this revenue category to increase in the coming quarters as we ramp up work. Overall, our actual revenue has been about 83% of what was expected through quarter two, which is very good and quite normal being this time of year. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now moving on to our expenses through quarter two. Our agency expenses are broken down into 3 categories, including admin expenses, direct labor, and direct costs. Overall, both of our admin and direct labor expense actuals have been very close to our projections through quarter two. We did see a higher variance in our direct costs for Q2, where we had projected 290,000, but actually charged about 55,000. And this is primarily due to the Vision Zero action plan, as our projection of the 290,000 included consultant-related work. Again, as previously mentioned, we do expect to ramp up on this work, and we will be engaging with consultants for the Vision Zero action plan in the coming quarters. However, in total, we've charged about 81% of what was expected through Q2. So overall, we are in good financial standing through Q2 when it comes to our revenue and expenses, and we will definitely be closely monitoring both revenue and expenses in the upcoming quarters as we near the end of the state fiscal year. Next slide, please. Thank you all for your attention, and we'll take any questions if there are.
Well, thank you, Silva. Thank you, Haral. Great job as always. Any questions for the finance folks? I had a quick one, which was I saw another financial position recently advertised, which is great news. Haral, could you just talk a little bit about what that individual will do and how we can be helpful in finding you the right person?
Thank you for bringing that up. We are currently recruiting for a finance coordinator to help Silva and I with the day-to-day operations of the finance group. So pretty much this person will be doing like all the accounts payable, accounts receivable, monitoring the billing. That's what the hope is, that we'll start with that. And that will allow for Silva to be more focused on some of the strategic level work as well. And we are currently also drawing out a plan for an upgrade to our financial system, which is we use Deltek Vision, and we need to upgrade to a different version. So that will take a lot of time to migrate it from the current version to the next one. So we do anticipate a lot of focus time on that. So I'm hoping that this new staff person will be able to help us manage all of our day-to-day operations.
That'd be great. And again, it's wonderful to see you staffing up and getting to the necessary headcount. In terms of the new financial management system, when do you expect that, and what sort of costs are we looking at to implement and switch over?
There's no cost except for staff costs, so there's no direct cost. It's included in our maintenance contract with MAPC, and the only cost, well, not the only, but there is staff related cost to transition, and then potentially if we hire like a third party vendor to help us with this transition, there would be a cost that, but we still need to test out what needs to be fixed when we transfer it. So MAPC is working on setting up a sandbox version of this new software, and so that way we can see how much effort we need to spend on it. So right now it's an unknown, but typically what Deltek says is it's like usually 12 months to an 18-month process to transfer from the current to the next one. So we do anticipate a lot of work on that in the next year or two.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions for Silva or Haral? Leonard, I saw you practicing *9. Good job. Okay. Thank you very much for the update. Keep up the good work, and we have full faith and confidence that you guys will continue to do the good work that you always do, and we'll get that overhead rate where we need it to get to. So thank you. We'll move on to item 4. Before I do that, no, wait, sorry, that's not this meeting. Sorry, too many meetings. Agenda item 4, goals update. Tegan Tyke will present this agenda item. Tegan.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the sound of my voice. I am in perpetual cold mode of January, February, and March. Seems to not ever end. But yeah, so this is my second presentation to this committee to talk about progress towards annual goals that I set in my evaluation process These are not things that I can accomplish myself. And so I'm talking about things that it takes, you know, quite a few people at the agency to accomplish. So please, you know, take that to heart as I talk about this kind of progress. And also please take heart. I'm trying to figure out, you know, good ways to talk to you about this. And so like last time, we talked a little bit about how this might be best discussed, and I'm happy to continue that with you. So next slide, please. So this is just a reminder of the process. I showed you the same information last time, because we are actually coming up to the next evaluation process. So in May is when I would fill out an evaluation form as the executive director of the staff to the MPO. And that form would be submitted now per the operations plan to the chair, the vice chair, and the chair of the A&F committee. So that essentially ends up being typically the people involved in the process are David Muller, Mark Drayson, and Brian Kane. And then there's some conversation, there's meeting and discussing the evaluation, and then in June, there's typically the finalization of that evaluation form, signature, and a salary adjustment that is recommended by those three entities from the MPO. And then the intent is to have quarterly updates to this group, which can question, discuss, and even potentially recommend updates to those goals. Now, just as a reminder, the last evaluation that I did was prior to the operations plan being approved. And so the way that I structured my goals in that evaluation plan did not really lend itself to this kind of update. So next slide. Oops, it went back again. Next slide is good. Okay, it's weird. That looks great. That's perfect. So I sort of have grouped what I had listed out in my previous evaluation into sort of goal areas to try to capture them in a way that I think is a little more meaningful, kind of in this more external facing way. So the goal areas that I identified in my last evaluation were around employee experience and retention. So kind of inward facing towards the employees at the agency. Also goal areas in terms of the board, the priorities that you all have and the experience that board members have in participating in the MPO. And then in terms of the agency, our fiscal responsibilities and the opportunities that we have in terms of our fiscal success. And then as an agency and as an MPO, there are goals I have in the area of sector leadership, really being leaders in the field of being an MPO. And then we, of course, have a strategic plan, a 5-year strategic plan, which we are in year 3 of implementation of that plan. And so a lot of those elements, overlap with other goals that I identified in my evaluation, but I think it's just useful to call out that there is also a distinct strategic plan with which there is overlap. So first, next slide, please. Let's talk about employee experience and retention. So I'm not going to recap what I talked about for the first quarter. I'm just going to talk about some of the most recent things that have been happening in this last quarter, just to keep things a little bit more succinct. So over the last couple of months in the sort of the policy area, we took a look at our employee classifications in the context of current, human resource related requirements and best practices, and decided that we needed some updates. So for the first time, we actually created a really succinct summary that we can reference about each employee type, put it in one place. And then we also took a look at all of our employees and made sure that they were classified correctly and receiving the appropriate benefits based on those classifications. So it was a little bit of, I think, just really good housekeeping and making sure that we're treating employees appropriately based on the level of work that they are doing. So that was some progress that we made. In the area of recruitment, you heard a little bit about this previously. Our recruitment processes have really been dialed in and they are sailing along. We have only made one additional full-time hire in the last couple of months. We made quite a few already throughout this state fiscal year. I would like to see that slow down, but we still have a lot more hires that we want to make to sort of recover from the lower staffing levels that we had from the lower staffing levels we had during some of the pandemic years when we were working more remotely and staffing levels were lower. We've also been looking at various ways to build culture and community in our staff, especially in this now kind of really well established, it's no longer new sort of hybrid work environment for our teams. And so one of the practices that we've been implementing, and I just kind of want to call out now, I think for the first time, is that we've implemented a practice of having new hire cohorts roughly 2 times a year to take on a group of, say, roughly 5 or 6 of the most recent hires, and go through a process that's led by, it was originally initiated by the deputy executive director, and it's led by a leadership team member, to kind of go through a series of getting to know each other. I'm going to put my cat out of the room. Excuse me 1 second.
Now I know why you're sneezing.
I know, right?
Maybe that's why I'm
I'm
sneezing.
very sorry about that. Should have done that before, but he wasn't bothering me before, so it didn't occur to me until he was bothering me. And so the new hire cohort has been a really great way to kind of build that sort of those kind of groups of folks across the agency at different levels of seniority and experience, and kind of bring us together more as an agency. And lastly, we've been looking at new opportunities for building skills across the agency. So we had an Asana task force that helped to develop guidelines for implementing the rollout of Asana across the agency as a project management tool. As part of that, we recently released some training videos that were developed internally with staff, kind of some new skills that we've used to develop these videos as well, but also to help teach people on staff how to engage with Asana, especially as a newer user of Asana. Let's go to the next slide. So in the area of board priorities and the experience of board members, we had already been talking about last time the upcoming annual meeting, but I just want to sort of talk about the implementation and the follow-up of that annual meeting. I consider it quite a success in that terms of engagement, in that we saw a number of the seat holders themselves showing up and participating in the process. And I felt that that was really positive, and it raised more awareness around the work that you all sitting here do, and that the MPO does as a whole. And then we also saw some successful outcomes in terms of sharing press opportunities with Mass DOT, in terms of amplifying some of the remarks that were made, particularly by the secretary on social media. And that again had some positive sort of awareness raising outcomes. I also feel that the success of the ad hoc committees, the ad hoc committee to update the ad hoc memorandum of understanding committee recommendation to continue the committee's work to do the full update of the MOU was a success as well. This is a really hard kind of process to engage in, and it takes a long time. But I still think it's a big step for that committee to get together the sort of the will together to make that strong recommendation. And now that MOU committee itself is established and charged with the task of making recommendations to the full board. And then lastly, in this area, I wanted to highlight that we have created, and now we are ready to implement, a new kind of orientation presentation for board members. And that will look but a little bit different than what we've done in the past. And I think it'll be a bit more realistic to implement. So you'll see that rolling out soon. And also, throughout the recent presentations that I've been able to make at the annual meeting about kind of the overview of the board, we've been able to start to adapt that presentation into more of a video format in a way that's also kind of a short clip that can be shared in multiple venues and formats. So with that, next slide. All right, so fiscal responsibility and opportunity, that's more the focus usually of this meeting. As you just heard, we're generally proceeding well in this area. Things are going as generally as intended with our revenues and expenses. And so we'll continue to monitor and highlight, opportunities and challenges as they arise. But one thing I really wanted to talk about in the context of what I'm more concerned about is the upcoming federal fiscal year, where we are expecting a very nominal, less than 1% increase in our PL funding, which is the majority of our revenue as an agency. So this year, I think things are going really well, but looking forward to the next year, it's important for us to think about the opportunities that we have as an agency to offset what is going to be a very nominal increase that really won't offset the cost of living increases and other, kind of inflationary type expenses that we see. So the second bullet here really is actually something that while small in dollar amount, actually represents a really important opportunity. We were able to work with Mass DOT to access $140,000 of de-obligated PL funds and the MassDOT matching dollars to go with those PL funds. In this case, for this fiscal year, to support some distinct kind of IT and other needs that we had. But the bigger deal around this is that it was also paired with a request by all the MPOs and a response by MassDOT to produce a guidance around how to do this in a more regular way going forward. So that is actually the use of these de-obligated funds is a really important fundamental way in which MPOs can access funds to help us deal with the variations that we see year over year in terms of staffing and funding flows and direct cost needs, one-off kind of projects that we need. So to illuminate this a little bit more, if you bear with me, over the last several years, we and other MPOs, not just in our state, but of course across the country, have been having trouble maintaining that full staffing level that we wanted to have to do our work. And at the same time, we saw this big increase in PL funds available due to the bipartisan infrastructure law. So that's great. We've been needing that. We was really excited to see the increase in funding, but the timing was mismatched with the capacity that we could build to access that funding. And so in those first several years, when there was that increased funding, we left some money on the table in the sense we couldn't use all the federal funding that was available to MPOs at the time. So we have an annual contract with MassDOT to use those PL funds, through which the state also commits the matching funds. And so when that annual contract expires, we have no mechanism to continue to spend those federal funds that we have not yet spent. And there's no commitment to the matching funds. So that makes it feel like each year, if we don't spend the money, we no longer have access to that money. But from the federal side of things, once that apportionment is made, those PL funds remain available to MPOs for another 3 years after that initial year of apportionment. So in response to this issue and the growing balances that we were seeing in those federally apportioned dollars that weren't getting fully used, MassDOT did work with the MPOs to develop the guidance so that we can work more regularly to access those de-obligated funds. The challenge for the state, obviously, other than the logistics and the contracting, is that if we are asking them for the matching funds for those dollars, that's also a commitment that they have to consider and figure out whether, that's a priority for their current use of funds. But my hope is that we'll continue to work together in that space with MassDOT to figure out how to make sure we're tapping all of those federal dollars and using them to really allow MPOs to be more flexible and creative in how we're able to use those federal funds to the benefit of the work of the MPO. So I spent some time on that because it seems like a small amount, but it's actually quite a big amount that's in those balance line items. And it's just so important for our ability to be flexible and creative in our work. And the last one on here is also an important one, which is that in terms of the fiscal stability of the agency, we've been looking to establish security in one of our major expenses, which is our rent, the lease in our office space. And we've been without a lease for several years, and we've been working with MassDOT as they've been working with some plans that have not come to fruition within the building to renovate the building space. There's just been this instability within the building and the plans that they have, and they've been trying to work with us, but I've been really concerned about having long-term stability looking forward in terms of what our rent will be and having spaces that we can actually work with and adapt to be better usable in like a hybrid work format, which our space currently isn't really well adapted to. So we did a scan of the market out there in terms of the office spaces available a little while ago and determined that certainly in this climate, there is reasonably priced office spaces available. And so now we have just completed a contract to engage legal support to explore some leasing options. It's not a guarantee that we will find a space outside of the building versus within the building. We can still work with MassDOT, but we're working towards getting to that point of certainty where we actually have a lease and we have some more kind of control over what we can do with our space going forward. Next. I'll be a bit briefer on the last two, even though they're still important. But I'd love to discuss any of these if you'd like. In terms of sector leadership, there's been some really exciting things going on. I know you've heard about a lot of them. One thing I can highlight in the last couple of months is that we received some national recognition as a finalist in the 2023 ArcGIS Story Maps competition. And I think a lot of you saw that. That was the story maps that was created for the Unlocking the Blue Hills study. We showed it at the MPO meeting. People showed a lot of interest. It was a really great creative way to make the more kind of like technical and engagement work that we do really accessible, and I think accessible and therefore implementable as a result. So we got some national recognition for that, and we'll continue to work towards having products from our work that are really accessible and lead to implementation, successful implementation. And then we're doing a lot of internal work as well to enhance how we do our work. We're really shifting to being more creative in terms of creating really multi-year visions and goals for our programs so that we're not constraining ourselves to an annual budgeting process in the sense of what we can accomplish within a program, but really looking out over multiple years. And then sort of shifting agency priorities as needed around what are the most important near-term emphasis areas so that we can work towards long-term goals in the LRTP. And right now we've identified our emphasis areas as being in safety, equity, climate resilience, and uncertainty. And the last slide. And then this is just to highlight again, there's a lot of advancement we're making in the area of the strategic plan, some things that have been a focus over the last several months and will continue to be a focus this year are following the roadmap for building a suite of new modeling tools. There was actually a workshop this morning with the kind of more technically inclined modeling community about the new travel demand model and the tools associated with it, because that model is being made accessible to the public. Not the public as in anybody can just pick up the model and use it, but it is going to be a resource that is available to the modeling community. And that's a really exciting way in which we can be a leader in the sector and actually learn with that modeling community how to make our tools better and stronger and more useful to our region. We are working to find more and better and different ways to expose staff to development opportunities. We are working on ways that we can create more of a hiring pipeline to the agency by engaging in things like career fairs. Several staff recently attended one. We are starting to really dig into exploring how we might expand our technical assistance activities in a way. Some of the Vision Zero work is sort of a pilot of that. We have relaunched and now are continuing the project management working group. And we are diving into, through some of these PL funds I mentioned, funding web improvements. With that, I think, is there one more slide just saying questions? There you go. That's it. That's my update for this quarter.
Well, Tegan, thank you very much. And before we open it up, I just want to say, from my perspective, the work that you and Gina and everyone have done to put a lot of the policies and the procedures in writing, stuff that in the past was sort of tradition or sort of just the way we did things. I think writing it down and putting these procedures in place, while, as you mentioned in your report, difficult and sometimes a little awkward, is really helpful and is setting the agency up for the future in a way that I think will allow it to continue from the strength where it's at to even stronger days in the future. So thank you. Leonard, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Tegan. This is great. These updates, are just really good for sales. I think it just tells us that we're going to set aside a certain amount of time for Tegan to talk and tell us what she knows, because that was quite the download of interesting information. And I will attest to the excitement around TDM 23. I was at the meeting this morning, and I think there is general excitement in the modeling community. As excitement goes for modelers, and so on. But I think it's going to be really, really interesting, the things that we'll be able to do with the model. And so I have probably missed the email, and maybe I missed it earlier in the meeting when I was trying to connect my phone. But where are we with a manager for the LRTP?
Good question. I am not sure where we are with announcing that.
Okay.
So
But So we have
We
one.
will be announcing that shortly.
Okay, because I was just getting a little concerned. I know you are too, because you know it's a long process, you know, and so yeah, I mean, and I know that you're doing all you can do, but I'm glad I asked because it seems like some good news is coming. So very excited about that. Thank you.
Yes.
That's it.
Len, you
That's it.
are quite the model. I know I speak for everyone when I say that. Thank you.
Everyone being one, Brian Kane. That's
You know, it's supermodel, Len, supermodel.
oh stop.
Let me also just say, I forgot to mention that I think it's great that you're at least testing the market for rent for additional office space, whether or not you stay in 10 Park Plaza, at least knowing what the market rate is and knowing what you're being charged relative to that is helpful. So I think that's wonderful. And if a move is afoot, you know, I've done it. It's not easy, but it is possible. So any other questions for Tegan? All right, so when we do this in May, which I think is the next time, we will. No, we don't have to do that. So, okay, great. Thank you, Tegan.
Thank you.
Item 5 is member items. Are there any members who have anything they would like to bring up or have presented at the next meeting? I wanted to ask that at the next meeting, we perhaps go into executive session to discuss the lawsuit that I think is still pending. So I just want to get an update on that. So I'll let you guys think that one through and figure out how you want to do it.
Okay, thanks, Brian. I'll relate the request to the appropriate folks and we'll circle back with you.
Yeah, or you can just, well, no, you can't just call me because that'll be circumventing open meeting law. Okay. Any member items? Okay. If that's the case, then I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. This is great. Thank you, Tegan, for that update. It was very informative. Appreciate it.
I'll second Eric's motion.
Awesome. And without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.